Welcome to Easy Email Marketing. I'm your host, Yael Keown, mum, FIFO wife, MBA, coffee lover, survivor superfan, and creator of the email experience. In Easy Email Marketing, you'll benefit from my nearly 20 years experience, where I'll be teaching you all the tips, tricks, and insider info on how to create feel-good, non-spammy experiences for your subscribers. Let's get stuck in. Welcome back to the Easy Email Marketing Podcast. I'm your host, Yael Keown, and today's episode, we are continuing the conversation all around using AI in your business. So this is the third episode in a series I've been doing all around AI. So if you haven't checked out the first two episodes, I highly recommend you do. The first one, I talk about AI being like your full marketing department and introduce you to the world of Claude and the different things you can do within the tool to make it be a full marketing department for you. Then in the last episode, I went specifically into Claude skills, which are a game-changing feature that will just make everything easier for you in your business. And it may even relate to some of the content we talk about today, which is taking a slightly different tangent. So I've talked a bit about the practical, but today is more around the mindset and creating that integrity and making sure you are approaching AI in an ethical way. Because I'm not sure if you've noticed, there's a lot of AI rubbish out there. And you are probably getting more and more suspicious about what is real and what isn't. And I'm seeing it all of the time, not just with things like copy and seeing like Facebook ads coming up with "let's be real" as the first line. I'm like, oh my goodness, that is overused. Or something that actually happens. Like there are just words that you see out there. But my kids are noticing too, right? All the little videos that they watch, those YouTube shorts, rubbish with cats doing crazy things. They're like, oh, that one's AI. Like, people are recognizing it. And what that is doing is diluting trust a lot faster. And this has actually been termed the trust recession. So while this isn't a brand new concept, you know, we've dealt with years of businesses and brands over-promising and under-delivering, and we've dealt with plenty of times where there's filters on Instagram, everything's too polished, too perfect. We've always had that bit of doubt, that bit of suspicion. AI has taken that to a new level. Trust is just at historic lows. But before you totally freak out, the good news for you is that small businesses are still considered the most trusted institutions around by a long way. So obviously big corporations, media, government, all that stuff out there, we have our big doubts. But people still at their core generally trust the small business owner. So you definitely need to leverage that to your advantage, which means you need to stay human. You need to still feel like the person and the business that they actually know. So that is our big advantage at this time. So of course that naturally leads to the question, should we use AI or shouldn't we? Because we don't want to lose our voice. And I am definitely of the perspective that we have to. You know, it is out there. If you want to keep up in the industry, in this world, like it is an essential. But there are obviously ways in which we need to approach this to make sure we are still showing up as ourselves. And if you do use it correctly, if you use the skills and the things that I've shown you already in this podcast series, you will have a leg up on everyone else. So I'm going to share 6 different things you could be doing practically, or different approaches you should be using when using AI to still maintain your audience's trust, to not lose yourself, to keep your integrity, but while also gaining all of those productivity and efficiency and sanity benefits and creativity that you get from AI. So the first thing we need to think about is rubbish in and rubbish out. This is the foundation of everything that we've talked about so far with your marketing department, with your skills. If you are still sitting in chat, typing a prompt from scratch with no context, no brand voice, no reference material, of course the output is going to be generic and sound like everybody else out there. So we do not want that. So that's why I don't recommend just using chat anymore. The more context and information your AI tool has, so your projects, your skills, your documents, your brand voice, the better the output. And remember, from the skills episode, we can make your brand voice a skill. We can make your target audience advocate a skill. It's not something you need to constantly be adding every single time, which is amazing. But once you've got it in there, you are good to go. So you've just got to think about your AI as a new member of your team. If you onboard them properly, give them that brand guide, introduce them to your audience, walk them through how you think it'll produce better work, and it will sound like it comes from your business. If you just say, here, write an email, it's just not going to work. So you do need to invest some of that time up front. But the great news is the data processing speed and the research capabilities and the ways in which AI can just grab all your data is amazing. Definitely take that into account and use that. But put them in. Take the time to build in those skills and those projects and those briefs. The second thing you need to be thinking about is when it comes to external research. So absolutely use AI as a research tool. So one of the most powerful things you can do is turn on that research mode and have it look at all of the data. And for things like target market sentiment analysis, the competitive landscape, industry trends, it can create great work. But despite some improvements, AI can hallucinate. It can just make stuff up. Something that is getting slightly better but is still not that great is when I ask for data and research around email marketing use, for example, and it will pull out statistics and it will give me the little reference links, and I'll click the reference link and I will search on that page. I find, that number is specifically what it says, and it cannot find it. So I go back to my little chat box and I say, you said this, can you point to exactly where that came from? It goes, oh, I just, that was just something that I pulled together and got a sense of. We need to be very careful of that, especially if you are an expert. So if you ever want to reference a statistic or a fact or something using Claude Research, validate it. Make sure you go back to the original source and check that it is correct. That is just a personal integrity thing. We cannot trust everything that is out there. And the last thing you want to do is for someone to come back to you and say, oh, but that's not right. And then you go, oh, sorry, I didn't check my sources. It's just not on. But that's one element of research, right? Instead of just asking about statistics and data, you can ask for things like representative quotes. So the kinds of things your audience might say about a problem or the feelings they have or an experience. So qualitative language and direct quotes are actually sometimes much more powerful in marketing than those numbers. So we can get that sense check from those, and having a direct quote from someone about how they feel, well, that's not something that can be misattributed so much. The third factor is leveraging your own internal research. And this is something that people completely overlook, but it is one of the biggest missed opportunities in how people are currently using AI. If you have been a content creator for some time or a business owner for some time, you have a gold mine of data. So think about your blogs, your podcast transcripts, your past emails, your client work. If you've got recordings of meetings, that is a full library of all of your own IP and your own thinking. So maybe you've thought about using that stuff to develop a brand voice, but how about you use it as a database for your AI to search? So for me, this is one of the most helpful things about having Notion as a connector. So I've taken a ton of time and made sure that every single blog post and every single podcast transcript and my core content as part of my courses is in my content database. And what that means is anytime I am trying to generate content or a social post or an email or, anything I want to talk about, I can say, can you look through all of the stuff that I have created? Look through my ideas, my tips, my tricks, and use that as the foundation. So you can use that external research, great, but combine it with your own. So one, I'm not starting from scratch. Two, I'm not manually looking through it all, trying to find it. I can say, I want to talk about this. Give me some topic ideas or pull out tips from here. So it's still my IP. So leverage that. You have an internal research on whatever topic you are going to use. The next factor to make sure you are maintaining your integrity and, trying to boost that trust is layering in you. So I think I've mentioned things like storytelling, sharing your real experiences, sharing your opinions, your values, your hot takes. We want to use that. But that doesn't mean you have to start from scratch and write that stuff every time either. You can train your AI up on who you are as a person. So sometimes it might mean that I think, I've got a great angle or I've got a great story or approach for this topic I want to talk about, a great anecdote. So when I'm creating the prompt to draft an email or to create a social post, I might say, can we talk about this, but from the angle of this story that I had? So it relates to me. But another helpful thing that I did was I got Claude to interview me. And I said, let's develop what I call a relatable details document. So interview me about the details of my life so you get to know who I am, what drink I like, my coffee that I like, doing puzzles in the evening, my morning routines, about my pets, my family, some of my values. Interview me and then put that into a brief. And so that way, instead of it just making up stuff about, having a morning cup of tea when I'm a coffee drinker, it will automatically just pull in those details. Sometimes it relies a bit heavily on some of the things. So as I've been playing with it, I've got my dog Oakley here. Hopefully you can't hear him snoring in the background. He's 17 and, doesn't leave my side. But I've mentioned that in that relatable detail. So all of a sudden, I'm getting lots of Oakley features in the suggestions about what they have. So you might be, okay, that's a little bit overkill. So have a think about what details and things about your life that you can trade your AI. And if you do have a good story or something that just happened that you think might make good content one day, just record it. Do a voice memo. Say, can you just add this to my notes about things and stories and anecdotes that you can weave into my content? Okay, so we've talked about rubbish in, rubbish out. We want to make sure we've got great foundations. We've talked about when you're doing external research to verify everything. We've talked about using your own content database as a research source, and we've talked about layering in you. That's a lot of the pre-work. That's all the stuff that goes in before you even start generating the content. But of course, once it's done, it's the first draft, that doesn't mean we end there. So the next thing is, of course, reading and editing everything. So it might sound obvious, but we definitely want to keep going back and forth a few times. And this isn't about checking for typos or saying, please remove M dashes, because we know that's something that is definitely a thing. But instead we want to read it as if you're asking yourself, would I actually say this? Is it true? Does it feel like me? And do not be scared to go back and forth. Some of my favorite interactions with Claude involve me just saying, no, that's not quite right. Or can you try that from a different angle? Or nope, you're totally off base. Or I want to emphasize this more, or focus on this angle, this approach. It's a conversation. It's not a vending machine of just once in, once out. It is a little bit of back and forth, and that's where the good stuff happens. And sometimes it means, okay, taking a whole different approach, and I get it to about 80% there, and then when I copy and paste it and I just do my own edits. Or it might mean, okay, we take it line by line and say, no, let's fix this, fix this, etc. But one more side note here, if you keep seeing the same phrase or the framing or like the same sort of errors come up and the things that just don't feel right, that could be a hint that it could be sitting in one of your skills or reference documents. So for example, I think in one of my first versions of like brand voice, it says specifically things about, here's the truth, let's be real, like those statements, because I am quite a, direct speaker. So it put those phrases in, but then I'm like, no, they're definitely overused and it's just started getting too much. And I was like, no, please just stop it. But I've had to find, okay, where's the source and say, can we update it? But the good news is your skills are living documents. You can get them to be updated at any time. You don't need to start from scratch. So you want to be reading and editing everything. And then the final tip, which is something really, really cool, is to build something called a checking skill. Or if you've got a skill that say is like an email marketing copywriter skill, you can go back to it. After you've finished it, start a separate chat, so it's starting fresh, and you go, based on this skill, can you review this content? So you ask it to look at the piece of content and assess it for things like your values alignment, whether your brand voice is coming through, whether it sounds like a human being wrote it. So you can do it from that side of things. You can do it from a technical best practice side of things if you have the experts there. So you can say, okay, we've done all this. I've done my personal review. Now, can you review it and look back at all of my messaging and all of the inputs that you have and tell me, does this sound like me? Is it doing some key things that need to happen that are best practice? Like, is there a call to action? Make sure that it is right. So you can also have this checking layer and a skill in place just to tidy up some of those things that may have fallen through the cracks. So a quick recap of where we got to. And to ensure we are maintaining that authenticity, that sense of you, that integrity, and bringing through you in all of your content and your AI, we need to be remembering that rubbish in equals rubbish out. So we want to have great foundations and information and branding work done up front. Number 2, we want to use external research, but we need to verify it and have that critical eye that any normal person should have in place. Number 3 is to use internal research, leveraging your own content. Number 4 is to layer in you through stories, through relatable details, through analogies, through experiences, through values, through opinions. Number 5 is to read and edit everything, having arguments back. And number 6 is to build in a checking skill just to have that sense check that everything does align with your brand values and your brand voice before you put it out here. So if you take those things into account, hopefully things like the trust recession and your audience's wariness and their fear of making decisions about, what to buy, who to follow, etc., can be alleviated by using some of these things. And actually, by adding in these layers, and if we have this filter of trying to create this trust, of keeping this integrity in our AI, and we've built in the skills to do it, AI might actually produce even better content than we would ourselves. Because I don't know about you, I struggle sometimes to come up with those stories. I struggle sometimes to come up with those analogies and those layers that add those personal touches. So the businesses that will shine through all of this and the ones who will still maintain that trust are still ones that are using AI to free up that time and that energy and using that extra time to show up more, to share more, connect more, instead of just going, oh, one and done, it's out there, and now I'm just going to, just let AI be everything in my business. So remember, you, of course, still have to be in the room. You are still the CEO. You are still the decision maker, the one coordinating everything, and AI is your team. Hopefully that has alleviated some of your concerns and given you some practical tips that you can take into the way you approach AI in the future. And next episode, I am going to switch back gears a little bit into more of the practical and just give some, day-to-day examples of how I use AI in my business. So you can perhaps take away some ideas for yourself and get inspired by all the possibilities that come through for your marketing, through your business, for your life. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'd love to hear from you about what you've enjoyed from this episode or what you want to know about more in future episodes. Let me know over on Instagram. I'm at @YaleHeon, and I'll see you in the next episode. Thank you for listening to Easy Email Marketing. It's an absolute honor that you chose to listen. If you love this episode, then it would mean the world to me if you could leave a review so that others can find this podcast and make their email marketing easy too. Finally, make sure to subscribe so that you don't miss a thing. Until next time, have an awesome day and make sure to keep showing up and serving in those inboxes.